card could not have stood as a numbered UFC event. So
what was it supposed to be? This card was actually supposed to be the Werdum versus Cain, because not only were they proposing that Miocic step in to fight Werdum today, but they were talking to Werdum a little bit earlier regarding why he pulled out the Miocic fight. So the injury that I just found out today for Werdum was that he had a foot injury, and this was a smaller nagging injury that people were trying to justify. Like, hey, if he was gonna fight Cain, why didn't he fight Miocic? In his own words, he actually came into Fox Studios and talked to Cormier right then and there in person, and he said, well, at first it was just a foot issue, and then he realized, later on in camp, he said he found out last Friday that it was like he had some issues with his back, so he's doing some rehab. So he said if it was his foot and if it was Miocic, he would have stepped in, he would have fought. He said, but since it was his back, it doesn't matter if it's Miocic or Cain or whoever it is. He said he cannot fight. He couldn't do it.
Right.
For him, obviously that's something that's significant that he wants to pull out. It's the first time that he had to cancel a fight. And that's the beauty of it, is that the UFC currently, the way they're able to manipulate the media around them and Fox, etc., they're able to make the fighters look like the next best thing since sliced bread. And I give anybody credit who's able to get into the cage and go compete against another trained individual who's also trying to finish them in the same fashion. But when it comes down to situations like we saw before, such as Ronda Rousey, her mystique being built up so high, it's clear that they're making sure that they're doing what they need to do to actually build a division and build a hype around the division, which they did a stellar job at. But when you think about the Cain Velasquez's of the division, when you think about that fight train that you mentioned, you said JDS, Bigfoot, JDS, Bigfoot. So it's like, when you think about that, it just helps me to realize the depth of the heavyweight division for that period. And I was like, wow, yes, he was coming off of these victories, and as you mentioned, yes, we already understood that you were better than JDS, but that's one of the routes that they had to go because they realized that rematch was that money fight. That rematch was the fight that people were interested in seeing, as opposed to, well, let's put him up against another top 5 heavyweight that nobody really cares for him to fight. It's similar to Cormier currently in the John Jones situation. They continue to hype up John Jones. Oh, he might be coming back. He might be fighting Cormier, etc., etc. And in my mind, we talked about this. I'm oblivious to whether or not John Jones comes back to division, but I do realize now that after looking at the light heavyweight division, that division does need him as a competitor, because he is a great addition as a competitor to the division. Especially when I look back at the top 10 in the division and I realize that it doesn't have very much depth.
It gets dark when you get past the top 4.
Yeah.
When you get past Gus, Rumble, Jones, and Cormier, whew, that is a drop in talent. And and the funny part is that those fighters could be Bellator, light heavyweight champions.
Yes.
Ryan Bader could easily be the Bellator light heavyweight champion.
Yes.
But when you have people like Daniel Cormier, when you have people like Anthony Johnson who can knock out a semi-truck,
yeah,
it's like a completely different level when you get to those top 4 monsters. But heavyweight, we actually have depth now. We have more than one fight we can make, which is weird. There was a time when heavyweight was just like 3 people.
Right.
It was Cain, JDS, and whoever else we wanted to put in that 3rd spot.
Exactly.
It was like, if you got a nice knockout, you were now the number 3 guy. But
wow.
Now we have more competitors for the fight. We have 4 top heavyweights that could all fight.
Talking about Frankie Edgar, for example, when they were saying, well, the reason why Conor McGregor would perhaps prefer to go to the 55 division, not only because he always saw himself as a two-weight weight class world champion, but the allure of fighting Frankie Edgar, the way he said it, he was like, well, Frankie's coming off a little bit desperate right now. He's trying to ask for the fight and so on and so forth. So I'm going to just let him sit for a while. But the reality of it is, Frankie, he seems very humble, even though you and I both know he is a champion at heart. He's a very, very good contender, highly well-balanced. He's extremely resilient, as we saw in the Gray Maynard fights and the various fights that he's been in. He hasn't been stopped, per se. He's lost decisions. So we know that it'll be a tough task for anybody to overcome in the 145 division, including BJ Penn, which, by the way, is coming back.
Don't even remind me about that. It's like, I get it. I get that he doesn't want to leave out on the note where he got beat by Frankie.
Does he have that chip on his shoulder?
Getting stopped, because remember how he used to say never been knocked down, never been knocked out. That was like his little like mantra.
Yeah,
because it was true. Like his TKO losses were really just, I think Matt Hughes had him in like the crucifix.
Yeah,
and couldn't get out, so the ref stopped the fight because he was like, "There's nothing you can do to improve your situation.
Yes.
So I'm just going to stop the." And it was counted as a TKO.
Yes.
So he was like, "I've never been knocked out. I've never been knocked down." Rory couldn't do it. Nick Diaz couldn't do it. But then Frankie went out there and just blew the doors off of him. Like, that fight was, it like, and I know Frankie's like elite. Like,
absolutely,
he's top 5 in any weight division you put him in.
Yes,
he's a top 5 contender.
And that's the thing I like about him, is that he's got the heart, he's got the resilience, he's got the skills, the techniques, the balance in terms of his overall skills with the ground, with the wrestling, with the submission game, with the stand-up game. So I appreciate his style of fighting as well, and the way that he does it and how he employs his strategy. But he's not completely strategic, where he's being that elusive fighter that so many people talk about, like your Machitas or your Dominic Cruzes. You know, the elusivity. That's not that. He's constantly trying to figure out ways to actually get in you and fight. So it was similar to the Chad Mendes fight, which is extremely impressive. You know, what took Conor a longer time to complete, Edgar was able to complete with that precision in terms of the way he was fighting and how he was able to implement his striking. He was able to put it right on his chin and put him right away.
That was an awesome knockdown. Like, that was the stamp Frankie needed.
It's funny.
What?
It's funny that you say that, because Aldo actually demanded that the only 2 fights that he wants in the 45 division would be Edgar or McGregor, period.
Mm-hmm. Which is smart, because he's like, if I beat Edgar, then I got my tune-up fight, and I won it. I'm ready for the rematch with McGregor.
Yes.
And then he's like, or I just want McGregor straight, which is him being even smarter of knowing that the UFC might not be willing to give him the rematch right away, even though you're going to give it to Rhonda Rousey, who got murdered by Holly Holm. You're going to give it to Cain, who got murdered by Werdum. You're going to give it to Chris Weidman, who looked like he shouldn't have been in the same cage as Luke Rockhold for most of that fight. But then Jeffrey Aldo, undefeated for 10 years, defended the belt 7 times?
Yes.
One more time John Jones did, no rematch.
Right.
But you know what you were saying about Conor? It's the same way that happened with Ronda Rousey. When Ronda lost, and if she never comes back to MMA, a huge chunk of her fans are just going to go away from MMA with her.
Yes.
Like, they came because she was winning, but they left when she lost, and if she doesn't come back, they're going to stay gone.
Yes.
They're not going to buy Holly versus Miesha Tate. They don't care about the fact that Holly Holm outstruck her in a way that was shocking with how, like, vicious and good it was. And so it's like, those type of fans, you're right. It's like, you want them because they'll buy tickets, they'll buy T-shirts,
sure,
they'll buy your book that you didn't write but somebody wrote for you. But when you lose, when you get head kick KO'd, or if Rafael dos Anjos goes up there and submits Conor or something like that, they're gonna go, "Oh, I'm done with this now," and walk right away. Yes, it's an interesting dynamic.
And it's crazy because, like, people who have studied martial arts or any type of traditional martial arts, for the most part, I can't speak for everyone, but some of the principles and the ideals that they teach in martial arts is that humility, right? So you're not supposed to go out there and talk trash to your opponent and then go out there and beat a person up or be a bully per se, right? But in the fight game, these guys are prize fighters. It's about money right now. They're trying to get to that belt. They're talking shit. They're selling the fight. They're talking shit to their opponents to elicit an emotional response from their opponents. They're also getting emotional responses from that opponent's supporters. But that's okay, because those are the same people who are going to tune in and buy the fight to see the person who's supporting the opponent beat the guy who's talking trash up. If he possibly can.